The hospital wing of the Galactic Council Station was supposed to be the most advanced in known space. Shimmering corridors of polished alloy, humming machines older than entire colonies, healers trained in methods no human could pronounce. It was a place where alien diplomats came to cheat death and return to their empires as if nothing could touch them. But that night, the hallway was cold, quiet, and the doctors walked away. Their white robes whispered against the floor as they left the girl outside the door, a young alien barely clinging to life. Her skin flickered weakly in the bioluminescent patterns of her species, once bright and beautiful, now fading to a dull gray. A medical drone chirped flatly, "No viable treatment." One by one, the medics turned their backs, their soft alien voices murmuring protocols and resource lists. She wasn't important enough. She wasn't valuable enough. Her life didn't weigh more than the Council's calculations. They left her there in the corridor, breathing shallowly, waiting to be forgotten. Ethan saw her from the shadow of the maintenance hatch. He wasn't supposed to be in this part of the station. He wasn't a doctor or an ambassador. He was a human engineer, someone who fixed power couplings and cleaned up after the fancy council healers when their machines shorted out. But he saw her and something inside him snapped. He'd seen this before. Aliens with all their power and all their technology deciding who mattered and who didn't. He knelt beside her as the medic's footsteps faded down the corridor. Her skin was cold. Her breathing hitched like someone drowning. A thin, metallic smell clung to the air. "Hey!" he whispered softly, even though she couldn't hear him. "Don't you quit yet." The nearest medic had already logged her as terminal. Her file was marked resource waste. Ethan stared at the glowing red letters on the console screen and felt something hot burn through his chest. Humanity had always been the underdog among the council races. The others looked down at humans as reckless, emotional, stubborn creatures who threw themselves into fights they couldn't win. And maybe they were right. But right now, that stubbornness was the only thing standing between her and the cold nothing. He scooped her up carefully, surprised at how light she was, her thin frame shaking in his arms like she was already halfway gone. The medics had used every piece of alien technology they had and declared her beyond saving. Ethan didn't have their technology, but he had something else. He ran, past security hatches, past blinking warning lights, down through the levels of the station most diplomats never saw. His boots slammed against metal floors, the sound echoing through the dark. The alien girl's breath rattled against his chest, weaker with every step. "Hold on," he whispered. "Just hold on." He couldn't take her back to the medics. They'd only let her die faster. But there was someone else. Not a healer, not an alien doctor with titles and robes, but someone who didn't care about council protocols. Someone who fixed broken things because they loved fixing broken things. The only place Ethan trusted wasn't the council hospital. It was the old repair bay on Deck 12, the one that had once been used for animals brought in from human colonies. When he burst through the hatch, the smell hit him first. Oil, heat, old steel, and something warm and real. The station's vet wasn't a doctor in the way the aliens meant it. She was a retired soldier from the Terran colonies who had spent more years saving creatures than the council had spent pretending to care. The room was filled with the quiet hum of human-built machines, crude but stubbornly reliable. She looked up from her table when he stumbled in carrying the alien girl. Her gray hair was tied back in a rough knot, her sleeves rolled up, her eyes narrowing as she saw the shape in his arms. "Ethan," she said slowly, "what the hell have you dragged in this time?" "Someone they left to die," he panted. "I need your help." She stared at the girl, at the grayish bioluminescent skin, at the faint rise and fall of her chest. "That's not human," she said flatly. "No," Ethan shot back. "She's alive." That was all it took. She didn't ask about politics, didn't ask about protocols. She just moved. She cleared a table, barked for supplies, flipped on every machine she owned. Unlike the council medics, she didn't need permission to act. Human tools weren't pretty. They weren't sleek or silent. But they worked. Ethan laid the girl down carefully, the vet's sliding sensors onto her wrists, her throat, the ridge of bone behind her ear. Her oxygen levels are tanking, the vet muttered. Her core temperature's collapsing. Council probably said it's irreversible, didn't they? Ethan's jaw clenched. They didn't say anything. They just walked away. The vet spat into a waste bin. Typical. She got to work, and Ethan stayed by the girl's side, holding her cold hand while the machines thumped and hissed. He didn't know her name. He didn't even know her species beyond the fact that she was from a fringe world that didn't matter to anyone important. But she mattered here, in this small, oily, human-smelling room. The vet did what the alien medics never tried. She treated her like she was worth saving. They cut away the synthetic council bandages that only tracked her vitals, never healed. They replaced them with rough but living human tech, stimulants designed for adaptability, oxygen lines meant for creatures with unknown biology. Humanity didn't always know what it was fixing. It just refused to let something die without a fight. Minutes dragged into hours. The vet muttered like a storm cloud, adjusting machines, feeding data into systems that shouldn't have worked with alien physiology but did. Ethan wiped sweat off his forehead, watching the faint flicker of light return to the alien girl's skin. It started at her fingertips, a soft pulse like the first breath of dawn, and slowly spread upward. She gasped once, a weak sound, but it was life. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. "She's fighting," he whispered. The vet glanced at the monitor, her wrinkled face softening just a little. "Damn right she is." The girl didn't fully wake that night, but when her breathing steadied, when the gray faded back into faint streaks of color across her skin, Ethan knew she was going to live. And somewhere, in the cold, polished hallways of the council hospital, alien doctors recorded her death and went back to their perfect routines, never knowing what they had dismissed. But word travels fast in space, especially when it's about humanity doing what no one else would. Within a week, whispers spread through the station. A human saved someone the council gave up on. Other aliens started asking questions they weren't supposed to ask. How many others had been left behind? How many could have lived if someone had just cared enough to try? And when the girl finally opened her eyes in the repair bay, weak but alive, she saw Ethan first. Not a doctor, not a hero, just a human who wouldn't walk away. She couldn't speak his language and he couldn't speak hers, but the look in her eyes was enough. It wasn't gratitude, it was something bigger. It was hope. Weeks later, when the Galactic Council held an emergency assembly to discuss what happened, they called it an incident. Ethan called it something else. He called it a beginning, because for the first time in a long time, the galaxy had remembered what humanity was best at. Not building empires or winning wars, but refusing to give up when everyone else did. And the girl he saved would become something the council couldn't control. A voice. A living reminder that sometimes the smallest act of defiance, one human refusing to turn away, could shake a galaxy built on indifference. If you enjoyed this HFY sci-fi story, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more tales of humanity's stubborn defiance and hope among the stars. The repair bay didn't sleep that night. The dim lights hummed softly above rows of dented equipment, battered medical carts, and old human-made machines that didn't look like much but carried a kind of stubborn life the polished alien technology never had. The vet's hands moved with quiet precision as the alien girl lay on the table, her breathing still thin and fragile. Ethan stood beside her, holding the girl's cold, trembling hand. Every inhale she managed felt like a miracle balanced on the edge of a blade. Her skin flickered faintly with dull bioluminescent veins, dimming a little more each minute, the soft light reflecting against the oil-stained metal of the walls. Above the old monitors, warning symbols flashed in red. No council doctor would have bothered watching those lights. They'd already marked her as lost. The vet moved fast, barking orders without looking at him. "Hand me the pressure band," she muttered, her voice low and gritty like the sound of old starship engines. Ethan grabbed the thick black band from the cart and passed it to her. She wrapped it around the alien girl's narrow chest, pulling tight until the readings on the old human monitor steadied a fraction. "She's got 2 collapsed airways," the vet said. "Council gear can't handle cross-species respiratory collapse. They don't adapt. We do." Ethan glanced down at the girl. She didn't even look old. Just young, scared, alone, left outside like she wasn't worth the effort. He'd seen it before. The council didn't care about fringe species. They cared about efficiency, about records and protocols. They liked things that fit neatly into categories. And this girl, whoever she was, didn't. She was someone they could abandon without consequence. His jaw tightened, a hard pulse beating against the side of his neck. Humanity had been treated the same way once. Not worth the effort, not worth the care. And they had clawed their way back into the galaxy through sheer refusal to die quietly. The vet slid a breathing tube into the girl's throat with the steadiness of someone who'd done it more times than she could count. "I'll get her airway stabilized," she said. "But we're going to need a donor compound." She shot him a sharp look, one he'd seen before when they'd fixed old colony beasts. "That means we're improvising." Ethan nodded. "We've improvised before." "Yeah," the vet replied dryly. "But this time it's not a dog. It's a sentient alien with biology I've never patched up." She bent down, adjusting the human ventilator that coughed to life with a rattle. "Get me the portable rebreather. And the med gel pack. The strong one." Ethan moved quickly, his hands sure from years of working with her. He found the battered rebreather, its surface covered in faded Terran Navy stamps, and brought it over. "She doesn't have a compatible lung structure," the vet muttered, mostly to herself. The council scans said her oxygen saturation curves collapsing. But they never try anything. They just pronounce it impossible. She pressed the rebreather mask against the girl's mouth and nose. The machine wheezed and coughed like it hated being woken up, then settled into a steady hiss. Minutes crawled like hours. Alarms came and went. Sweat ran down Ethan's forehead. He kept holding her hand, whispering nonsense words. Soft human words she couldn't understand, but it didn't matter. It wasn't about language. It was about not letting go. "Stay here," he whispered, his voice low and rough. "You're not done yet. Not while I'm standing here." The vet used human medical gel, something the council considered primitive because it worked. It adapted to what it touched. It didn't require perfect knowledge of alien anatomy. It only needed something alive to fight for. She smeared the gel along the girl's chest, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the sensors twitched, the faint glow under the girl's skin stuttered, and a single weak breath rattled its way through the rebreather. The old vet let out a sound between a growl and a sigh. "That's it, sweetheart," she whispered under her breath. "Don't give them the satisfaction." Ethan didn't even realize he'd been holding his breath until the light under her skin flickered stronger. The glow spread from her chest outward, curling like ribbons of pale blue across her body. He'd never seen anything like it. "She's stabilizing," he said, his voice cracking. The vet didn't look up. "She's fighting. That's the difference between us and them. They look at odds. We look at chances." The night bled into the early hours of station morning. The medics upstairs had probably already signed her death certificate. Somewhere in the pristine white wings of the hospital, they were probably drinking imported spiced water and congratulating themselves on their efficiency. Meanwhile, in a greasy corner of Deck 12, two humans and a pile of outdated machines were dragging a girl they didn't know back from the edge of death. Around the 4th hour, Ethan's hands cramped from holding her. He didn't let go. Not once. The vet adjusted the tubing with a practiced flick and stepped back, sweat gleaming on her forehead. "She'll make it," she finally said. "If she's made it this far, she's got fight in her. And that's something the council never counts on." Ethan leaned against the edge of the table, his body aching, his throat raw. He looked down at her face, the soft pulse of her alien light now glowing steadily. She wasn't just some number on a chart anymore. She was alive because someone refused to accept the word impossible. When the vet stepped out to get more supplies, Ethan stayed. The repair bay was quiet now except for the heartbeat of the machines. He lowered his voice, whispering into the dim. "You're safe here," he said. "I don't care who they say you are. I don't care who walked away. I'm not going anywhere." And somewhere beneath the layers of tubing and pain, the alien girl stirred. Just the faintest twitch of her fingers. But it was enough. Ethan didn't know it yet, But this night would not be forgotten. This was how stories started. Not with fleets or declarations, but with one human kneeling in the dark, refusing to walk away when everyone else already had. The repair bay was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt alive. Not empty, but listening. The hum of the rebreather filled the room with a steady rhythm. A heartbeat for someone who almost didn't have one. A pale golden glow from the alien girl's bioluminescent veins cast soft light on the walls, painting the steel in ghostly patterns. Ethan sat slouched in a chair pulled up next to the table, his hands still wrapped gently around hers. He had lost track of time hours ago. The vet had gone to check supplies, but he refused to move. Every flicker of the light beneath her skin felt like proof that they hadn't been wrong to try. The girl's breathing had steadied but remained shallow, fragile, like a glass ornament that could shatter at any second. Her chest rose and fell in careful, almost hesitant rhythm, each breath pulled through the old human rebreather strapped to her face. The machine itself was older than both of them, held together with parts Ethan had welded together long after the council declared it obsolete. But it worked because it was made for survival, not elegance. The medics upstairs would have pronounced her dead already. To them, anything that didn't respond to their perfect technology wasn't worth the effort. Ethan leaned closer, studying her face. Her skin shimmered faintly with alien markings, patterns that pulsed like faint starlight with every breath. He didn't know her species' language. He didn't know her story. He didn't even know her name. But he knew the look of someone abandoned. He'd seen it in refugee stations, in mining colonies left to rot after the council stripped them of resources, in the eyes of human children who learned too early that they weren't considered worth saving. That look was the same across species. A soft hiss of the door broke the silence as the vet came back in, carrying a tray of replacement oxygen cartridges and a steaming mug that smelled faintly of burned coffee. She set the mug on a nearby crate and started swapping out the old tanks with practice speed. "She's holding steady," she said without looking at him. "That's a damn miracle, if you ask me." Ethan's voice was rough, tired. "I don't think miracles had anything to do with it." The vet gave a short, humorless laugh. "No, just two idiots too stubborn to let someone die." She adjusted a sensor and glanced at the monitors. "She's strong. Her body's adapting. Council medicine doesn't even try when the numbers don't match their charts. But we're not bound to their charts." Ethan exhaled slowly. "They just walked away, like she was a broken machine they couldn't fix." "That's because that's exactly how they see her," the vet said, her tone sharpening. "People like her, species from outside the council core, their statistics, their liabilities. If it doesn't profit the council, it's not worth saving." Her words hung heavy in the room. It wasn't the first time Ethan had heard something like that, but hearing it now, with the girl lying between life and death because of it, made it burn hotter. He remembered the day humanity joined the Galactic Council. Everyone back on Earth had celebrated like they'd been accepted as equals. It had taken him only a few years working on council stations to realize the truth. They were never equals. They were useful tools. And tools were only cared for while they worked. "She's from one of those border colonies," Ethan muttered. "You can tell by the skin pattern. Council's probably already logged her as a loss." The vet snorted softly. "Then we'll just have to prove them wrong." They worked through the night, taking shifts watching her. It wasn't glamorous work. There were no glowing alien medbeds or elegant surgical fields. There were greasy tables, patched machines, and two humans who didn't know the alien girl's language but understood the meaning of not giving up. Ethan kept her hand in his, and as the hours passed, her skin warmed slightly beneath his palm. The rebreather's rhythm grew less ragged. Her body wasn't just surviving now. It was fighting back. At one point, near what would have been dawn on Earth, her fingers twitched again. Not a reflex this time, but a real, tiny movement. Ethan froze, staring down at her hand. The vet, half asleep in her chair with her mug of coffee gone cold, jerked her head up. "What happened?" "She moved," Ethan whispered. Both of them leaned over the girl, the sound of the rebreather filling the silence. Her eyelids fluttered faintly, the thin membrane of her species' second eyelids shifting like a ripple on water. She didn't open them fully. Not yet. But it was enough. It was the first spark of her climbing back from the edge the council had left her on. The vet straightened up, her tired face creasing into something that almost looked like pride. "You stubborn little thing," she muttered to the girl. "Good. Keep fighting." Ethan sat back down slowly, and for the first time since this started, he allowed himself to breathe a little easier. But underneath the relief was a slow, growing anger. Not at her. Not at himself. At them. At the way those doctors had turned their backs on someone because she didn't fit their protocols. He could still hear their polished, clinical voices in his head. No viable treatment. Resource waste. Not priority. He wanted to burn those words out of existence. "She's going to need somewhere to go after this," Ethan said quietly, more to himself than to the vet. The vet sighed, rubbing her eyes. "You know what happens to people like her. The council will pretend she never existed. They'll put her on some transport to a dying colony, or worse, they'll take her to one of those silent wards." "Not if I have anything to say about it," Ethan replied, his voice hardening. The vet looked at him for a long moment. She'd known him for years. She knew that tone. Once Ethan decided something, there was no power in the stars that could move him off it. "You're going to make trouble, aren't you?" she asked softly. He leaned back in the chair, still holding the alien girl's hand as the glow under her skin brightened just a little more. "I think trouble already found me," he said. Above them, in the pristine halls of the council hospital, no one even remembered her name. Down here, in the repair bay that smelled like oil and warm breath, two humans were about to make sure the galaxy didn't forget her face. Because sometimes all it took was one moment, one act of defiance, to unravel the carefully built cruelty of an empire. And Ethan had just taken the first step down that path. The lights above flickered softly, and the alien girl's fingers twitched again. A faint sound escaped her throat, weak but alive. It was a beginning, a very dangerous one. Morning never truly came on the station, only a slow shift in the lighting that pretended to be sunrise. The repair bay was soaked in the dull gold of the simulated dawn, soft and warm compared to the cold white sterility of the council's upper levels. Ethan sat in the same chair he had been in all night, hunched over slightly, his tired eyes locked on the alien girl. She was still unconscious, but the difference was obvious now. Her chest rose and fell more steadily. Her skin glowed brighter beneath the translucent patterns of her species, and the rebreather no longer hissed in panic but in rhythm. The room smelled like old oil and disinfectant, but to Ethan, it smelled like victory, small and quiet, the kind that no one in power would ever record. The vet entered with another tray of supplies and a mug of black coffee that steamed like a furnace. She set it down on the crate beside him and glanced at the monitor. "Vitals are climbing," she said, trying to sound casual, but he heard the relief tucked inside her voice. "If she keeps this up, she might wake soon." Ethan rubbed a hand over his face, feeling the grit under his eyes. "She's tougher than they thought." "She's tougher than they cared to find out," the vet corrected sharply. She leaned over the girl, checking the tubing, adjusting the oxygen mix, muttering under her breath. The council has spent centuries building their precious medical system, but it's designed to save them, not everyone. The moment someone doesn't fit the model, they're tossed away. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't need the reminder. He'd seen it too many times already. Entire colonies abandoned because it was too expensive to maintain. Refugee ships turned away because they weren't priority. Humanity itself had learned its place in this hierarchy long ago, low enough that they were tolerated, never embraced. And now here was another life nearly lost because of the same cold calculation. He looked down at the girl. Her breathing had the faintest tremor to it, like a storm that hadn't decided whether to pass or break. He'd spent half the night whispering to her like she could hear him through the haze, and even though she hadn't moved again since the twitch of her fingers, something in him refused to stop. "You made it this far," he said quietly. "Don't stop now." The vet didn't look up from her work, but there was a small smile tugging at the edge of her tired face. "You talk too much," she muttered. "Someone's got to keep her company," Ethan replied. The station above them was already stirring. The sound of freight lifts thudding, the distant hum of engines, the murmur of passing footsteps. None of the people up there knew what had happened in the cold hallway outside the council med wing. None of them cared. But whispers had a way of crawling through walls. Already, 2 engineers had quietly dropped off extra medical supplies at the bay door without a word. Someone else left food. People knew. And more importantly, people remembered. Around midday, the first knock came at the door. A soft, uncertain sound. The vet stiffened slightly, her hand drifting toward the wrench she kept on her belt like a weapon. Ethan rose, shoulders tense. No one official ever came down here. When he opened the door, a pair of maintenance workers stood awkwardly outside, shifting on their boots. One of them, a stocky man with grease on his hands, looked past Ethan at the glowing light around the girl. "Word's going around," he said in a low voice, "that a human's got someone the medics dumped. That true?" Ethan didn't flinch. "Yeah, it's true." The man's eyes hardened. Not in anger, but something sharper. Something familiar. It was the same fire Ethan had felt in his own chest when he'd found her there. "Good," the man said. "About damn time someone did what they wouldn't." He held up a small box of old diagnostic modules. "Not much, but these still work on non-standard biology. Thought you could use them." Ethan took the box without a word, his throat tightening. It wasn't the gift that hit him. It was the quiet, stubborn solidarity behind it. This was how humans survived. Not with fleets, not with glory, but by showing up when no one else did. The 2 workers left just as silently as they came. "She's already changing things?" the vet muttered when he closed the door. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" The vet leaned back against the wall, crossing her arms. "Word like this spreads fast. When the council turns its back, people notice. And when someone stands up against that, even for one life, it cracks the lie they live on. You think she's just one girl, but the moment you carried her out of that hallway, you started a fire." Ethan stared at the sleeping girl again, her skin glowing softly in the dark. He hadn't been trying to start anything. He'd just done what no one else would. But maybe that was exactly why it mattered. Hours passed in silence after that. The girl's vitals climbed higher, her breathing deepened, and the golden glow beneath her skin brightened into soft patterns that danced slowly across her arms. Ethan noticed it first, the flicker of her eyelids, the faint shift of her head against the table. He leaned forward instantly. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey, can you hear me?" The vet stepped closer, her hands steady but her eyes locked on the monitor. The rebreather hissed softly. A sound escaped the girl's throat. A soft, hoarse whisper in a language Ethan didn't understand. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes unlike any he'd ever seen. Bright and liquid, reflecting the gold of the lights around them. She blinked slowly, disoriented, and her gaze fixed on Ethan. For a heartbeat, the room held still. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know where she was. But she saw him, and something in her expression shifted. Fear and confusion giving way to the smallest flicker of something else. Trust. Ethan swallowed hard. "You're safe," he said gently. "You're going to be okay." She didn't understand his words, not the language. But she understood his voice. The bond between the saved and the one who refused to give up didn't need a translator. She exhaled softly, her hand twitching toward his. Without thinking, he took it. The vet let out a long, slow breath. "Well," she muttered. "Looks like she's not dying today." Above them, the council moved on with their clean, perfect lives, pretending she never existed. But below, in a little forgotten corner of the station, a new story had just begun. It wasn't loud. It wasn't grand. But it was dangerous, the kind of story that traveled on whispers, growing teeth as it spread. The girl's grip around Ethan's fingers tightened just a little, and he squeezed back. He didn't know her name yet, didn't know the kind of storm this small act of defiance would create. But he knew one thing for certain: whatever came next, he wasn't going to let go. And neither, judging by the fierce spark flickering in her golden eyes, would she. The girl's recovery didn't make the station brighter, but it changed the air in the bay. Where there had once been silence and the mechanical hiss of the rebreather, now there was the soft sound of breathing that wasn't forced anymore, steady and real. Her skin glowed faintly like a constellation scattered across her body, her veins pulsing in gentle gold light that reflected against the dull walls. Ethan sat at her side again, not out of obligation but because something deep inside him wouldn't let him leave. She had opened her eyes the night before, seen him, reached for his hand, and even if she didn't speak a single word of his language, he'd felt something in that moment. Something heavy, quiet, and binding. It wasn't gratitude exactly. It was the raw, wordless trust of someone who'd been abandoned and found, against all odds, that someone refused to let go. The vet moved around the room like a storm disguised as an old woman, slapping equipment into shape and muttering to herself. She had been through a dozen border wars, watched humanity scrape its way into a galaxy that didn't want it, and nothing surprised her anymore. But even she glanced at the girl sometimes, her weathered face softening just slightly. "She's stabilizing faster than any council doc would have believed," she muttered. "They'd have put her in a storage bay for the dying by now." Ethan didn't answer at first. His eyes were still locked on the girl's faintly glowing patterns. "They didn't believe she was worth trying," he said finally. "That's the difference." The vet snorted. "Yeah, they like to pretend they're the smartest ones in the stars. But they forget what stubbornness looks like. That's our specialty." She leaned against the wall, folding her arms. "Word's spreading, you know. People are talking." He turned to her, brow furrowed. "Talking? Of course," she said with a half-smile that didn't reach her tired eyes. "You dragged a dying alien out of the council hospital and saved her with duct tape, human engineering, and spite. The mechanics upstairs are calling you the idiot with a heart. A couple of cargo runners dropped by earlier, asked if it was true. You started something whether you meant to or not." Ethan leaned back in the chair, a heavy exhale leaving his chest. He didn't want to be a symbol. He didn't want anyone's eyes on him. He'd just seen someone left to die and couldn't walk away. "I didn't start anything," he muttered. The vet tilted her head, unimpressed. "That's where you're wrong. You did exactly what they're afraid of. You proved their system isn't perfect. That a single human in a greasy bay can do what their golden towers wouldn't." Outside the repair bay, the shift in mood was already underway. Maintenance workers, haulers, fringe traders, people who lived at the edges of the council's clean world, had started whispering. They'd seen the medics walk away. They'd heard the council's cool, empty words. And now they saw what humanity had done. Humans didn't have power. They didn't run the council. But their stories traveled fast, faster than any ship. By the time the girl's skin was glowing bright again, the whispers had already reached corners of the station where rebellion slept lightly. The girl stirred again, a faint sound escaping her throat. Ethan leaned forward instantly, his hand brushing against hers. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the light. There was fear in them at first, waking up in an unfamiliar room, surrounded by strangers. But then her gaze found him again. The same human who had carried her out of the cold hallway. The same human who had stayed by her side. Her glowing fingers twitched and, slowly, she reached for his hand again. He met her halfway. "You're safe," he said softly, knowing she didn't understand but saying it anyway. "You made it." The vet walked over and checked the readings, nodding with grim satisfaction. "She's going to live," she said. "And when she walks out of this bay, the council's going to choke on its own arrogance." Ethan looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "Look around," the vet replied. "Everyone up there has spent their whole lives believing they decide who lives and dies. But this girl's existence says otherwise. That's dangerous to them. They don't like stories that make them look weak." As if to prove her right, a faint chime echoed through the door. A council alert. Not a knock. An order. Ethan stiffened immediately. The vet scowled. "Well," she muttered. "I was wondering when they'd start sniffing around." Ethan opened the small screen by the door. A sterile council message glared back at him in cold blue light. Patient classified as non-recoverable. Retrieval for disposal is scheduled. No apology. No explanation. Just the quiet, brutal efficiency of a machine that believed itself infallible. They don't even know she's alive, Ethan whispered. They don't care if she is, the vet growled. Alive or dead, she's just a line item to them. Ethan's jaw clenched. His chest burned with the same hot fury that had carried him down the hall that night. Then they're not getting her back. The vet gave him a look, one that carried 1,000 years of trouble behind it. You're picking a fight with the council. Maybe, Ethan said quietly, but they already started it when they walked away. The vet didn't argue. She'd seen enough humans make stupid, dangerous decisions when their hearts decided for them. But this wasn't just reckless. This was human. That stubborn, infuriating, unbreakable defiance that no empire ever managed to crush. The girl squeezed his hand weakly, and for a moment, the anger gave way to something softer. She didn't understand the words being exchanged, didn't know the politics or the danger building outside the door, but she felt the warmth in his grip, saw the determination in his eyes. She had been abandoned by those who were supposed to save her, and yet, this stranger, this human, refused to let them erase her. The vet sighed, a low, heavy sound. If we do this, we can't go back. Once they realize she's alive, they'll want to silence it. Can you handle that? Ethan didn't hesitate. I'm not handing her over. She studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Then we make it count. Outside, the whispering on the station began to shift into something else. Not just gossip, not just curiosity, a quiet, simmering anger. Humans and other fringe workers who had been told for years that they didn't matter now had a story that proved the council could be wrong. And nothing spread faster than that kind of story. The girl's breathing deepened. The glow beneath her skin pulsed brighter. And in that moment, as the council prepared to take her away like a broken thing, Ethan realized something. This wasn't just about saving one girl anymore. This was about drawing a line in the stars. The station didn't know it yet, but a storm was coming. And it began with a single human who refused to walk away. The corridor outside the repair bay filled with the cold hum of the council's automated patrols long before the alert officially went out. Ethan could feel it in his chest, like pressure building before a storm, the air tightening around him with every passing second. The council didn't waste time. When they declared a patient non-recoverable, it wasn't just a medical note. It was a verdict. People like the girl on the table weren't supposed to live. And if they did, the system moved quickly to erase the evidence. Inside the bay, the girl lay on the narrow table, breathing steadily now. The golden glow beneath her skin pulsed with life, stronger than ever. She was no longer the dying shadow Ethan had carried through the sterile corridors. She was alive, and her being alive was already breaking rules that the council had spent centuries cementing. Ethan paced near the door, fists clenched, the council's cold message still burning in his mind. Retrieval scheduled. Not a request. Not an option. A removal. Like she was cargo. The vet sat on a crate, her elbows on her knees, eyes narrowed. She'd seen this kind of thing before, too many times. Not with aliens, not always, but with humans too, when the council decided certain lives weren't worth the resources to save. You've got maybe 10 minutes before they send the first retrieval unit, she said flatly. And that's if they're feeling generous. Ethan stopped pacing. They won't touch her, he said, but the words felt like iron dragged across his throat. They will, the vet replied, because they don't care who she is. They don't care who you are. They'll send 2 enforcers and a drone, log her as a biological error, and she'll disappear before shift change. Something inside him tightened. Not fear, not exactly, but something sharper, older, heavier. He had spent years living in the shadow of the council's quiet cruelty, watching them decide who mattered and who didn't. He had fixed their machines, cleaned their decks, worked their systems. He had lived in the cracks of their empire. But he'd never stood against them like this. Not until now. Not this time, he whispered. The vet leaned back, studying him carefully. If you do this, Ethan, there's no going back. You'll be marked. And so will she. He turned toward the girl. She was awake again, blinking slowly, her golden eyes adjusting to the soft light of the bay. She was weak, but her breathing was steady, and her glow filled the room like a quiet sun. When she saw him, she didn't flinch. She didn't try to run. She simply reached for his hand again, the way she had the first time. There was no language between them, but there was trust. That was enough. Ethan stepped closer, kneeling down beside her so their eyes met. "They're coming for you," he said softly, knowing she wouldn't understand the words, but hoping she'd understand his voice. "And I'm not letting them take you." She blinked slowly, the light around her veins pulsing as if in response. She didn't know what was happening, but she believed him. That was enough to lock something deep inside Ethan into place. A loud metallic click echoed through the corridor outside. The vet tensed immediately. "That's them," she hissed. Ethan moved fast, slamming the heavy security brace into the door's manual lock. It wasn't much, just old human steel against council systems, but it bought time. He turned to the vet. "How long before they override it?" 2 minutes, she replied, standing now, grabbing the emergency toolkit from the wall. "Maybe less." He nodded once, a hard, sharp motion. "Then we make those minutes count." She gave him a look that was half annoyed, half proud. "You've really decided to make this messy, haven't you?" "You taught me," he said simply. She snorted. "Yeah, I did." The first impact hit the door a few seconds later. A dull, controlled thud that rattled the hinges but didn't break them. The council never rushed. They didn't need to. They always won. But this time, Ethan wasn't playing by their rules. He crossed the room to the side panel, pulling out the old maintenance interface that ran beneath the council's newer layers of control. While they used polished encryption, humanity had always been good at crawling into places no one else bothered to look. He pulled up the power grid for this deck, his fingers flying over the cracked interface. "If I reroute the airlock safeties and trip the coolant lines," he muttered, "I can force a station safety alert. It'll lock every retrieval unit in containment protocols." The vet arched a brow. "That's going to piss them off." "Good," Ethan said, his voice low and steady. Another impact on the door. Louder this time. The girl flinched, eyes wide, her breathing quickening. Ethan turned back toward her and forced his voice soft. "Hey, look at me. You're safe." He didn't know how much of it she understood, but she didn't look away. The vet moved to the back wall, flipping open the old emergency chute, an abandoned maintenance access that led down into the lower decks. No one used it anymore. No one but smugglers and ghosts. "If you're serious about keeping her away from them, this is your only path," she said. "It's dark, it's filthy, and it smells like engine coolant. But the council won't look for anyone down there. They think they're too important to crawl." The door groaned under another hit. This time it didn't just shake, it bent. Ethan rushed back to the girl's side, carefully lifting her into his arms. She was still weak, but she didn't resist. Her head rested against his chest, her golden light casting long shadows on the walls. He glanced at the vet. "You're not coming?" She shook her head. "I'll hold them off. I've got more years on this station than their whole retrieval unit put together. They'll waste time trying to control me." He hesitated for a heartbeat. "They'll arrest you." She smirked. "They've tried before." The door split at the top corner with a screech of metal. Council enforcers were close now. Ethan stepped toward the chute, the cold air from below crawling up around his legs. The girl clung to his shirt, eyes darting toward the sound of the breaking door. "It's okay," he whispered. "We're leaving." The vet crossed to him in 2 steps and grabbed his shoulder, not gently. "You understand what this means, right? Once you disappear, you can't just fix ships and stay invisible anymore. You're taking a stand. That's a dangerous thing." Ethan met her eyes. "I know." She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly, releasing his shoulder. "Then make it count, kid." The final blow hit the door. Metal screamed. The seam tore open like a wound, bright white light from the hallway spilling in as 3 council enforcers stepped through in perfect formation, faceless helmets reflecting the bay's flickering light. The lead drone floated behind them, cold and silent, its retrieval clamps extended like blades. But Ethan was already gone. He slid down into the chute with the girl in his arms, the cool air whipping around them as they disappeared into the lower decks. The vet stood alone in the room, facing the council enforcers. She cracked her knuckles and gave them a grin that had nothing kind in it. "Took you long enough," she muttered. Down below, Ethan landed on the maintenance floor with a grunt, his boots splashing into puddles of old coolant. The lower decks were silent except for the distant rumble of engines and the slow drip of leaking pipes. No one came here anymore. It was forgotten space, a graveyard of old systems and older ghosts, perfect for disappearing. The girl shifted weakly in his arms, blinking up at him with wide, gold-lit eyes. For the first time, Ethan smiled. Not a big smile, not one of triumph, but something quiet and certain. "We're not done," he said softly. "Not even close." Far above them, the council thought they were tightening their control. They didn't know they had just lit the fuse, because one human refusing to let go wasn't just a small act of rebellion. It was the kind of story that burned through walls, across stations, across entire empires. And now that story was on the move.